looks like today, so far, it's just Al McCarn and myself, and I am Mark Call, of course, live from the sunny mountains of southern Colorado. Al is way out east, almost, but not quite to the coast, and Jeff is not with us today. So let's go to Al and say good morning, and see what's at the top of your list for things to talk about.
Hey, good morning, Mark. Yes, it's quite sunny here in North Carolina. And, well, I got a lot of things to talk about. Look, I could talk about breaking news coming out of Jerusalem. How about that?
Go ahead. Let's do that. We got basically hot spots all over, and of course, in terms of scriptural elements, Jerusalem is probably close to the top, and Israel in general. Although when we talk about the Bible, Israel is a lot bigger, and indeed, Israel, as it's been known, has never been as big as the Bible says it's going to be someday. So, kind of worth paying attention to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, let me caveat this by saying we can easily go into prophetic implications of all the things going on at the Temple Mount. Okay, if you know your Bible, well, pray through it and look through it and see. But even if not, we're looking at the escalation of the next great Mideast crisis, as if we ever left the great Mideast crisis. And, oh, by the way, it happens right in the middle of the dire straits between the 19th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. So what happened? Last Friday it was that there were 3 Arabs who came off the Temple Mount and shot dead 2 Israeli border police officers. Now, they were Druze officers, not Jewish officers, but they're wearing Israeli uniforms, and therefore they are fair targets. So what happens after that? Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu does the reasonable thing and shuts off access to the Temple Mount for everyone. First time that has happened in many, many years. Then the Temple Mount is opened up again on Sunday with additional security measures. This time, instead of just non-Muslim visitors having to go through a checkpoint with metal detectors and scrutinized by, first of all, Israeli security officials and then Muslim Waqf security officials, and then being harassed by Muslim Waqf security officials while they're up there, this time everybody, Muslim or not, has to go through metal detectors. Sounds kind of reasonable. You don't want to have terrorists going up on the holiest site in the world, right? Well, that has caused
of course they run it and have for a while.
Yeah. So here's how it got to be escalating. Is we've got the Mufti of Jerusalem and other Muslim officials who are calling for a boycott of Muslim prayer on the Temple Mount. Why? Because Muslims have to go through metal detectors now, just like everybody else. So that's what happened. And you had these pictures from last Monday of Muslims bowing down in front of Israeli security officials. I mean, they're bowing toward the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and all, because they can't go through there. They're not going to go through the metal detectors. It's kind of interesting. They're bowing in prayer to their God.
Well, just imagine, Al, how horrible it would be if this ban on Muslim prayer on the Temple Mount, or in fact, for crying out loud, in the whole country, became permanent. If they just decided to boycott Muslim prayer to the point where they're not going to do it at all. Why? Would the world come to an end? You have to ask.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe so. But if
I guess we could live with it.
Headlines in places like Breaking Israel News, you'll see Messianic Implications that are debated there. And so go to that. There's some interesting articles. But what this did, in a very ironic turn of events, without the Waqf officials there to harass people, Jews went in and they started praying on the Temple Mount. Now, that was against the rules. Folks got arrested for it by Israeli police. But that happened. So then we come to today. It's Friday. It's the holy day for Muslims. What do? Well, they call for thousands and thousands to flood the Temple Mount and be protesting the security officials' measures. Yes, it happened. And tragically, as I'm looking at Times of Israel right now, there were 3 Palestinians reported killed in the protests in Jerusalem and in the West Bank. It seems like the Israeli security had a handle on it, and it was dying down. But, Mark, this is not the end of this thing. We've got already the Arab world, not surprising, the UN, and even the United States and other nations of the world calling on Israel to compromise on these quite reasonable security measures, I would say, take away the metal detectors, and return the status quo. So it has ratcheted up the tensions there in the Middle East. Oh, and one other complication, if you didn't know it, folks, the Muslim Waqf, the foundation that controls the Temple Mount and administers it, it is Jordanian. So this complicates Israeli and Jordanian relations, which also complicates their cooperation and work regarding the Syrian civil war, which also throws in a monkey wrench to what the United States is trying to do in the Syrian civil war vis-a-vis Russia and Iran and Hezbollah and everything else. So guess what? It's all linked. I find it kind of fascinating to watch.
Well, the it's all linked part is clearly undeniable. And I guess where I come down on all of this, Al, is I look at the news that we've seen in the last couple of weeks and tend to say, okay, it's almost like you have this little temperature gauge, and it always stays somewhere up pretty close to the red line throughout the Mideast. And certainly in the case of Israel, we've seen many terrorist acts over the years, some bigger, some smaller. For the most part, more or less continual. The only thing that really seems to raise or lower the temperature is the death toll on individual accounts. And then, of course, over the years, we have people saying things, and the temperature goes up for a while. But as I step back and look at this, I can't help but think, all right, perhaps the idea of the Temple Mount itself and the ban on prayer, the self-imposed moratorium on prayer by the pagans on the Temple Mount is interesting, and the fact that Jews are going in and breaking the law, or at least what passes for it there now, is interesting. When it comes to the metal detectors, I'm not a fan of people being treated as slaves anyway. I don't think metal detectors have any place on U.S. airports any more than warrantless searches or wiretaps do. But on the other hand, I guess when it comes to putting the Muslims through the things that they're basically putting everybody else in the rest of the world through, I can't see too many crocodile tears cried on that score. So I'm not sure quite what to make of this, other than the temperature has gone back up again towards the red line, and I guess we'll see whether we get anything really major that precipitates out of it. And meanwhile, of course, we got temperatures rising all over the world too.
Quite right, and that's the whole point. The temperature is high up there. We got a whole week before to see what happens next, but the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu says, no, we're going to keep these same security measures, that's a poke in the eye to the UN and the rest of the world, saying, hey, by the way, we happen to be a sovereign nation, and we're taking the steps that are required to secure our sovereignty and our people. Oh, kind of like building a border fence in the United States.
Well, and I wish there would be more eye-poking going on for the UN. And I don't want to continue talking about climate change and all that kind of jazz, because we know it's bogus. But more and more studies by honest, actual scientists are coming out and saying the UN needs quite a bit of eye-poking when it comes to things like non-existent man-made global warming. They're not alone. We got a man who likes to play God and wear a funny fish hat in Vatican City that is probably one of the most evil men to ever inhabit the Vatican, and that's saying quite a bit. He's a bit like the Obama of the Vatican City. So in so many respects, Al, I guess you look around and you see all of these places and things and people that are trying to move the world towards war on so many fronts.
Yes, indeed so. So we've got, we've talked Middle East, but what other hotspot has got your attention today?
Well, we'll come back to aspects of the Middle East, because I don't think you can talk about what's really going on there without talking about economics, and there's a lot to deal with on that front. But this story caught my eye this morning. It actually was on the top of the hour news too. U.S. has now urged all Americans to, if you're in North Korea, get out of there. And they're talking seriously about a tourist ban, kind of like what happened with Cuba for a long time, to prevent people from going back. So basically, the story is, it would seem that tensions are increasing with North Korea as well. And how long have we been talking about the possibility of a first strike or something going on there? It does seem like in so many respects, North Korea might be the tinderbox that even beats the Middle East to the punch.
Well, that's true. Now, first of all, I am wondering who in their right mind would actually go to North Korea as a tourist.
Yeah, you got to wonder on that score.
Yeah, you do got to wonder. That's another one. It's not going away. And even though we don't see urgent headlines, no, that crisis is still percolating on. And like anything, when you have an unstable leader of what is in truth a rogue state, North Korea is the definition of rogue state. Criminal state, North Korea is the definition. So they have nuclear weapons. They have all kinds of ways to hurt and kill people. The crisis is not going away. But that's all right. We have our Russian and Chinese friends to help us in this, don't we?
We got one more story, and we'll get to the economic aspects of World War III. As you may know, Al, I have contended since the attack on the Russian ruble quite a while back that World War III is engaged, it's active, and it just hasn't gone hot to the point where most people are aware of it yet. So we've seen continued escalation. We had the stories this week. How dare the president actually go during the G20 dinner in the after-dinner mingle session and privately, well, not privately, he was in a room full of American and European leaders. But how dare he go over, because Melania was sitting next to Putin and actually chat with Vladimir for a little while. It's like the media is just beside themselves with apoplexy that an American president could possibly do such a thing, because after all, if we're going to nuke him, well, we don't want to talk to him. This story came out this morning. Several sources, Max Slavo is one of them, Zero Hedge has it. The leader of Chechnya, a fellow named Ramzan Kadyrov, gave a rare interview to a media outlet in the United States, and he said something that has taken a number of people aback. Yeah, you've got the usual, he's saying bad things about gay people. That's a big deal. But a troubling comment was made about his country's nuclear arsenal and a Russian doomsday device. And basically what he said is there is, in fact, a Russian nuclear doomsday device. It's it's evidently in Chechnya, and it has been activated. So make of that what you will.
I'm having pictures of Slim Pickens riding a nuclear bomb down to Russia. If you haven't seen Dr. Strangelove, folks, it is perhaps one of the top 10 classic Cold War movies
of all time. Yep.
Well, and that's where we learned about the Russian doomsday device. So they really got one. Wow.
It has various names. The term dead hand has been used, and the idea for those that, if we have any listeners that haven't heard about it, is that these are automated systems that in the event of a complete meltdown, in other words, they get nuked into the next universe, that would hopefully, at least according to the designers, survive and then launch a final counterattack that would destroy everything that was left, thus basically ensuring that mutually assured destruction would take place.
Yeah, a doomsday device. So now we have the Chechen leader who's saying the Russians have it.
Okay, yeah, and essentially what we're seeing here is that it's not just on Russian soil, and I'm sure the U.S. has the same situation. Obviously, the point of submarine-launched ballistic missiles and the nuclear subfleet is a similar thing. You put the subs all over the place, keep them deep. Hopefully the enemy doesn't know where they are, and if all else fails, they're the final dead hand that comes back and does the dirty deed there.
Yeah, and see, this is why limiting nuclear proliferation was a smart thing. Why classic Cold War superpower politics pretty much ensured that we would not have a terrible global nuclear war because of this mutually assured destruction. But if we have mad men like Kim Jong-un, and if we have apocalyptic prophets like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and other Iranian leaders, well,
and John McCain, for crying out loud.
Oh, yes, yes.
We got people in this country that if I was Vladimir Putin and I was watching the Lindsey Grahams and the Obamas and the Hillary Clintons and the John McCains and others, I would say, for crying out loud, I don't trust these people any further than I could throw them. Am I going to basically sign up for a bill down, knowing darn well that they lie through their teeth? They put their hand on the Bible. They can't even be trusted to do their duty and honor their oath before their own people. Why would I trust them when it comes to my national security? So in a world where trust is a thing of the past and honor is too, it's no wonder we're seeing this escalation.
Yeah, it is no wonder. And it means the sane, level-headed people who would try to keep anyone from pressing the red button aren't there anymore. The red button is just kind of like sitting out there waiting for someone to fall on it.
And so, that's part of the reason why we're seeing so much, well, I would at least echo some concern about the mainstream media's apoplectic anger that Trump would actually meet with Putin and all of this attempt to blame the Ruskies and to foment World War III. The deep state war here is undeniable. It's literally to the point where I look at what's going on with the WAPO and the New York Times and all of these people and the McCains and so forth of the world and say they are itching to push the red button.
It does seem that they are itching to push the red button. And as I've said before, whatever we think of President Donald J. Trump, and I still don't know if we really understand his core values. I don't know if he has revealed these things. There are plenty of people who could guess one way or another whether he's a saint or an evil person. I'm not going to make that judgment call. Fact is, he's president of the United States. He is the one charged with running the foreign policy and the security policy of the United States of America. If he is trying to reach out to our biggest adversary on the planet, Vladimir Putin, and try to forge a relationship, let him do it. It would probably be better for the whole world if they are able to find ways to cooperate.
I think I agree, because essentially what you're saying, Al, is even if he's lying and even if he's duplicitous, he's no less so than the people who have been running American foreign policy for decades, the neocons and their ilk. And as a result, it can't possibly be any worse. Well, I guess we haven't had a nuclear confrontation yet, but I would tend to look and say, as sad as this is to admit, the reason is because Vladimir Putin has showed restraint, not Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I would think so. And, of course, if you're looking carefully at it, if you play chess, if you understand strategic policy, this would tell you, all right, Putin understands where he and Russia are vulnerable. So he's going to try not to overplay his hand. And that leads into his restraint, indeed. But then, if he is backed into a corner, well, he will do what he needs to do. So my thought is, and Mark, indeed, I think you got my point right. As long as we are talking, it is better than throwing missiles and things at each other.
And at this point, Al, the sad truth is, whether we're talking North Korea or Syria, and it does look like tensions have backed off a little bit there. Perhaps it is because of some discussions between the two level-headed leaders, or at least more level-headed than the nutcases in the Senate and in the deep state. But there are nevertheless all kinds of trigger points literally everywhere, from the Mideast to North Korea to Syria, and probably others that we're not even necessarily aware of at this point. All right, as we go to break, I want to throw out one more story that I think fits here. When we come back, we'll talk about the economic aspects of this, because I don't believe you can discuss anything associated with World War without realizing follow the money is always the real truth. But this story came out literally a week ago tomorrow, and it comes from Baxter Dimitri, your Newswire, and a source that is on, or was at least, I don't even know if he's still alive, on his deathbed, an 80-year-old retired CIA agent named Malcolm Howard, who has been told that he has not long to live, and he's decided to come clean. He worked for the CIA for 36 years as an operative, and he claims he was tapped by senior CIA agents to work on the project that involved, are you ready, the demolition of World Trade Center Building 7. because he was an engineer, and he had an extensive background in demolition. He was a civil engineer, became an explosives expert, and he talked at some length in this interview about what they called Operation New Century. And it culminated, as you probably have heard, in September of 2001. And essentially what is kind of interesting here is how he describes being literally disgusted with the fact that, at least during those days, people just, they badmouthed the CIA, and they didn't realize these people were doing a job, and they were patriots and so forth. When you're a patriot, he said, you don't question the motivation of the CIA or the White House. You assume it's a greater good, a bigger purpose, and they pick good, loyal people like me, he said, and it breaks my heart to hear this kind of trash, that's a polite way to put it, trash talk. But now on his deathbed, looking back, he says, you know what, something wasn't right. And he went into some length about how for literally a long, long time, they secretly, and it was the only time he had to do this in his career, moved high explosives. He called them military-grade nanothermite composite materials and explosives into the building. They had to get thousands of pounds of explosives, fuses, and ignition mechanisms into the building without causing too much concern. But they did. They succeeded. And on the day that the 9/11 false flag happened, they watched the whole thing on TV. Hours after the other buildings were down, when it was time to pull the World Trade Center Building 7, they watched it happen. They had the cigar and the booze out, whiskey and cigars. All of a sudden, he said there was a strange quiet in the room. The assembled agents started to worry if the demolition hadn't gone too smoothly. We watched the tape again and again. We started to get paranoid because it looked like a controlled demolition. We thought, and I'll clean this up, people are going to question this. And then the BBC came out and botched their report. They announced the blowing up of the building 20 minutes before it actually did. We really thought the jig was up, he said. They were afraid people would see through the official narrative. But my comment, hey, never underestimate the power of human stupidity. Big Brother covered it all up, and now this guy has come out and said, you know what, I guess it's time to tell people what really happened. Take us away, Al.
Yeah, I would like to say that's all hooey, but just look at what happened in Iran in, I think, 1954. Just look at what happened in Cuba in 1961. CIA engineers' efforts to change regimes and to alter the world. Why wouldn't it happen here?
Well, look, Al, what happened at Oklahoma City. Yeah. As an engineer, I watched Oklahoma City, and I know personally General Benton K. Parton. I interviewed the man on April the 19th for a number of years running, met him, and had discussions with him. And basically, what he makes really clear is anybody with even a high school level understanding of physics can look at the Oklahoma City Murrah building bombing and know that it was a false flag. Literally, it was a physical impossibility that a lone bomber like Tim McVeigh and the little teeny truck bomb he put out front could have done the damage. It was contact explosives. The holes didn't even line up, for crying out loud. So, yeah, it doesn't take much education to go through the list of things that have been blamed on, well, anybody else and realize the American people have been lied to. So what's funny here is it's just one more case of...
All right, it is Friday. It is July 21st, and if it's Friday, then that means this must be Drive Time Friday, which it is. This is Al McCarn coming to you from North Carolina, and way off on the other side of the continent in Colorado is Mark Call.
Halfway, anyway.
Yeah, halfway. Well, true. Jeff Gilbert would be with us today, but I think he's taken the week off, and we miss him sorely, but... that doesn't change the fact, Mark, that the economy of the world continues to limp on, right?
Limping is the question mark here, because you got to wonder how many legs does it have left at this point. We spent a lot of time in the last segment talking about aspects of World War III, and as I mentioned, I have contended that we're already there economically. And here is another story. All we saw this week was just kind of one more nail in that little coffin. Out of Russia and China. Now, it's been no secret for literally years that the demise of the U.S. dollar as the global fiat reserve currency is all but written in stone. The only question is when. For the longest time, think Saddam Hussein, think Iran, think Iraq, if any, and Libya as well, if anybody dared to talk about trading for, say, oil in anything other than U.S. dollars, they were signing their own death warrant. In the case of Saddam Hussein, he literally came out and threatened it. Any number of people have observed, if you're not part of the world dollar currency regime, you can expect to die. And we've had the various, what's the word I was looking for? A fellow wrote a famous book, and now I'm drawing a blank. I can't think of his name or the name of the book. But it had to do with the fact that economic hitmen, like the guy whose name I can't think of, would come out and bring countries down and destroy their leadership. Well, in any case, Russia and China have been moving to transact trade in other dollars. Got a horrible echo all of a sudden. Anyway, so basically the story is that Russia's largest bank, state-owned Sberbank, announced that its Swiss subsidiary has begun trading in gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So they've been talking about this for a while. This week, it has become a fait accompli. Russian officials now signal they plan to conduct transactions with China using gold as a means of basically backing up their alternative to the U.S. dollar in bilateral trade. And this is all part of the move towards a BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and so forth, alternative to bypass the petrodollar.
Well, let me ask you, Mark, and you're right that there are those who have tried to do this in the past. Saddam was one, and there is that compelling case that both invasions of Iraq in 1991 and in 2003 were driven by this attempt to circumvent the petrodollar regime.
By the way, if you want to name just a few of there's only a hand, you can count them on the fingers of less than one hand anymore, of countries that aren't part of the international dollar regime with the international central banking cartel that's been set up. One, you might know, is Syria. The other is North Korea. Isn't that amazing?
What a surprise. Well, yes. Now, I'm thinking of another one. I recall 10 years ago or more, there was this great concern about the Iranian oil bourse, this Iranian initiative.
Yep.
To trade oil in other than dollars.
It's still there. It'll come back.
Yeah.
And it never really went away, I guess. It'll become a higher priority and a higher profile thing as we go forward.
Yeah, that was my question. I know that it had been established, and you follow economics much better than I do. So I was wondering if it was still limping along, and now we have these Russian and Chinese. Well, it's an initiative indeed, but as you said, it's been going on for a while. So what are we about to see? I mean, are we truly about to see a viable non-petrodollar global economic regime stand up?
Well, I like to quote the Wicked Witch of the West, if you remember the line from the movie The Wizard of Oz, where the green lady says, "These things must be done delicately." And it literally has taken decades, certainly years at this point, as things have accelerated, to move in this direction. Jim Willey, one of my very favorites, wrote a great piece. I talked about it over the weekend entitled Global Currency Reserve at Risk, and he's been chronicling the rise of these alternatives. And basically, people that have been paying attention, particularly small countries, know that if they dare to move in this direction, think Bashar al-Assad, they just might end up dead or attacked, and the U.S. will send surrogates against it. People like the fellow that was Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Now, his biggest sin was he actually entered into a treaty with the United States. He had a lot of gold, and somebody came and got it after Hitler, he famously said, we came, and we saw he died, and we stole his gold. So much of this has taken so long to set up, but now we're seeing the final pieces of an alternative, and the world has pretty well had it with the fiat dollar. So Jim Willey's piece was essentially about how the court of U.S. financial terror is losing its privileged perch. And the breakdown of the U.S. dollar is financial, it is universal, it is profound, and when the global reserve currency status finally is lost, the American public will see and feel things that it has never had to deal with before. They'll be confused, they have been lied to. One of the big pieces in this, Al, of course, is the fiat gold and the silver paper trading that has been going on. It turns out if you want to control a currency and try to convince people that there's no such thing as what economists would call real price discovery. In other words, what's something worth? Well, you can't tell if you price it in fake units that don't have any actual weight or measure to them, like dollars. What's a dollar worth? Well, you don't even know what a dollar is anymore. It's worth exactly what somebody will give you for it, and as long as you force the rest of the world to buy something they really got to have or they die, like gold and food, in terms of dollars, you can keep the scam going. And it's real helpful if you can control alternatives like the price of gold and silver and say, see, people don't want this stuff. So one of the things that was done a while ago as part of China and Russia moving to an alternative was the Shanghai Gold Exchange. I've talked about that for several years as it's been built up. And it's basically an alternative to the COMEX and the London bullion market. So all of these things have been a long time coming, but now that they're in place and they're slowly beginning to move into the markets, China and Russia have all been acquiring gold, especially China, quietly. There's a big story this week about how Australia sold more gold to China than they ever have before. So all of these things basically say we're pretty close to the time when the mask can be removed.
Wow, this reminds me of the world of the Hunger Games. A great series of books. I love the premise. But, when you talk about the American public being lied to and all, it's kind of like those in the Capital District in the Hunger Games, just living in their own little world, not aware of what's happening elsewhere, that actually the Capitol was like an octopus sucking in everything from its tentacles to feed itself. And that's essentially what the petrodollar regime has been doing. So I guess, in a sense, we have justice about to be done.
Well, and you have even before that movies like The Running Man and the ancient the Roman lie, right? Bread and circuses keep people occupied. I used to joke about as long as there's Sunday football and beer and pizza, people won't care. And for some time I've suggested that, when will the American public wake up? Well, even a dollar collapse won't get it. It'll be when they walk into Walmart and the shelves are empty and they see lines out front to get what's left that they figure out just how badly they've been had. So, again, we're seeing all of these things. In the meanwhile, what you and I tend to talk about and what we've talked about on Drive Time Friday, and I do the news show literally at this point for a number of years, have been the mile markers along the way, the little signposts that tell us how close we're getting. This week we had a couple more. I'll throw this into the mix, too. The Federal Reserve Open Market Committee, they met. And they basically did nothing. They have been telling the American people, the economy is so good, the recovery is robust, going to raise rates real soon now. Oh, come on, who are you kidding? They're going to raise rates when they think they can blame Donald Trump for the implosion that's going to happen. And then they'll say, see, this inevitable implosion shouldn't have happened, it's all his fault. But then last week actually, we had Janet Yellen in testimony before Congress, and she flip-flopped. So we talked a little bit about that. Essentially, the question is, was she lying then or is she lying now? She got more dovish, as they say, and maybe there won't be rate hikes after all. And then what we had earlier this week was the European Central Bank parallel to the Fed and their version of the evil Janet Yellen, Mario Draghi, got on TV, and he tried to do what used to be referred to as baffling them with BS. And Mario Draghi basically couldn't paint a picture with both hands. And people were left scratching their heads and saying, what did that guy say? Are they tightening or are they loosening? Who knows? And that's the entire point. So is the Fed flip-flopping? Are they basically backing off? It would seem that they are, but of course they've lied before, and maybe if they think they can get away with it, they'll go ahead and pull the plug on this. Other folks are saying don't be fooled. The Fed is going to continue their rate hikes, and they will stick a wooden fork, or I guess it's a wooden stake, in the economy come fall. Americans may wake up to it a little bit when they see the Dow Jones Industrial Average collapse, because they don't seem to think that there is any real indicator in the economy other than what the stock market's doing. So all of these things, as you pointed out, whether it's the Running Man or the Hunger Games scenario, people have been lied to. They don't have a clue what's going on, and they won't until it's probably too late.
So I'm thinking in terms of cycles of history here. Now, everything you've described, Mark, it would happen. You use the term inevitable. There are things that just can't be stopped. But then there's the question of how much is being helped along. And this is where I get to population control. Now, I saw an interesting headline from WorldNet Daily today. It says, plot to replace Europeans with refugees exposed. Oh, the horrors of it. Well, what they're citing here in this article is a United Nations document from the year 2000 entitled Replacement Migration, Is It a Solution to Declining and Aging Populations? And basically the article is saying what shouldn't be a surprise. Yeah, I mean, it's that the UN, the European Union, you pick your usual suspects, they're actually promoting this mass migration of people from the developing world into Europe and the United States. Why? Because the birth rate in these Western countries is declining. So in pure, stark economic terms, it is better to replace those populations with younger, growing populations.
Can I say a word here?
Why is the migration crisis upon us?
Bull.
Oh, say again.
Bull. It has nothing to do with replacing the declining populations any more than the need to make sure you don't have air conditioning and an SUV has anything to do with non-existent man-made global warming. It's all about economics. It's about follow the money, and it's about making sure that when the time comes, they pull the pin on the hand grenade and they can explode implode is more like it, the entire stinking system. So let's see if we can't connect some dots, and I'll tell you my opinion, of course, but I'm not alone in this, how it is that it's not about population unless you want to consider population control. It's about bringing things down. So the whole point is we're going to blow up the Mideast. We're going to get people that would have wanted to come anyway, give them a perfect excuse for claiming to be migrants. Now note that there aren't very many Christians in there. They're all getting killed at the source. So what we're doing is we're bringing in the bomb threat. We're literally doing exactly what that CIA agent did with World Trade Center Building 7. We're bringing in the explosives in mass. They're bringing them into Europe, and they're literally setting the charges, but these are population bombs, if you will. They're doing the same thing in America. ISIS is coming across the southern border along with Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, and other gangs. These are all attempts to destroy systems that they want to bring down. And here's the key, Al. This is the part that I think people have trouble really kind of wrapping their heads around. We get these major cycles. I got the book The Fourth Turning sitting on the shelf here. They're not alone. The people have pointed out for hundreds of years. One of them is a famous fellow named Kondratiev. There's the Elliott wave. They're basically all saying the same thing. There are cycles in human history. And if you go back and you look at American history even, just the last couple of hundred years, you will see that we have a Great Depression about every human lifetime. Typically it's 70 years or so. This last one has started, arguably, in 2008, but it's been kind of stillborn for the time being. I contend that it's still in process. It just hadn't taken the final swirly down the toilet yet because it has been put off. So there's a famous line that I remember from Alan Greenspan, former Fed chairman, who once said, we will beat the Kondratiev wave. In other words, and this is back around the turn of the century, turn of the millennium, he said, we're going to pump so much money, we're going to try to see if we can't beat the inevitable decline into Great Depression by pumping money like there's no tomorrow. You don't beat the K wave or the Elliott wave or the downturn. You might be able to kick the can down the road and delay it for a little while. So essentially, Al, here's how I will tie all of these things together. The population bombs, the physical bombs, the economic bombs. They have been trying as hard as they can, pulling out all the stops to, maybe beat it, but most people know it's not going to be beaten. Just delay it. And they'll delay it and they'll delay it. And in the meanwhile, they're getting themselves primed and ready for what's to come. And if you really want to make money in crooked markets, what you do is you take the inevitable and you make sure that you can time it properly so that you profit from the collapse. We saw that with the World Trade Center, right? If you know precisely when you buy your puts, you can make a killing, literally. And they did. And so they will pull the plug. And we will see things come down on every front, I believe, economic, physical, you name it, when the Fed and the ECB and the others decide, okay, we can't delay it any longer. pull it, just like they did with World Trade Center 7.
Well, there's nothing you've said, Mark, that I can argue against. In fact, you've said what I've been thinking, only better. And I would say, though, if you look at the collapse of Rome or, the cycles of world history, they are cycles. And the smart people, would you call it that? Anyway, it's an attempt to
evil
shape
geniuses.
The inevitable. Yeah, shape it, time it, manipulate it. That's what you're talking about here. Today in the 21st century, with all these wonderful technological toys and devices and stuff, it's a little easier to do, I think.
Well, to some extent, it's
a little easier to do than.
To some extent, you're right. It's easier. On the other hand, to some extent, it's harder because we have communications that we didn't have. We have people like all of us and all the listeners out there, people that have been in tune with what's going on. They can read Scripture, they can read history, they know about economics, and they can see what's coming. And they tend to rat out the bad guys. So a lot of times, and we've seen this with some of the big players, people like Alex Jones have mentioned it, Rush Limbaugh and others, if some high-profile pundit will reveal the plot, sometimes they have to back off. It doesn't mean that the inevitable end game changes. It just means that they say, oops, that beta test failed. So that's part of the reason I talk a lot about beta tests. You'll see it in India with the chipping of the population and the moves against gold. We've seen it in Greece and other places. All of these things are essentially various elements, and as an engineer, I did this all the time, so I recognize it. We called it impulse function testing or step function testing. You hit the system you want to characterize mathematically and build a computer model of. You hit it with some kind of a jolt, and you see how it behaves, and you can literally model it mathematically, and that's exactly what they're doing with economies and world populations. And it's evil, it's satanic, and it's completely computerized.
Why, yes. But again, it's more efficient than, say, those who were dealing with Rome and Parthia and those civilizations from 2,000 years ago were doing. So, but if you lived in Rome in the year, say, 250 or 350, you could move to, I don't know, the growing Vandal kingdom in North Africa, or perhaps to Celtic Britain or someplace like that. You can't move anywhere now because it's totally global.
And that's part of the reason why I have suggested for a while that what we're fixing to see is going to be a meltdown, literally, of biblical proportions. It's the kind of thing that, while we've had prophetic elements that have played out and cycles do repeat, you can look back and say, oh, this prophecy has been fulfilled, maybe more than once. I do believe that we're going to see a prophetic fulfillment of things that ultimately, the only way it ends is with a miracle, a point where, and I like to joke about it, I call it the minimum necessary miracle. It's kind of an understanding of the Creator. He will use miracles when He needs to, and they will be of whatever scope it is that He needs to do whatever He wants to happen. I think most of our listeners can say, I've seen miracles in my own life. And we know, because we've seen them, that they're miracles. But a lot of times people who weren't there would say, well, that's not a miracle. That could have been chance. That could have just happened, right? But on the other hand, something like the parting of the Red Sea or the 10 plagues, well, that's a little bit tougher to explain away, although so-called science will try. We're going to get to the point, Al, when people are going to have to say, you know what, the biggest brother you can imagine with artificial intelligence and all kinds of capability to manipulate the masses, Big Brother is watching. Well, this is really scary. And that God, the Big Brother God, is truly impressive. Guess what? It takes a biblical proportion real God to show them, just like we saw in ancient Egypt, who the real God singular is and who the fake gods multiple are.
Which brings to mind that, because this is all scary stuff, it is doom and gloom. It's no place to run, no rock to hide under.
And that is by design. That's the key. We just have to remember that. And the Creator of the universe is basically building up to a point where people will be able to say, look, there is no place to hide. You either got to trust in the real God or face it, you're going to die. It's that simple. And when people wake up to that, then we'll be able to say, here we are.
Exactly, which brings to mind this. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I will trust. And go there and read the rest of Psalm 91. This is the answer. There is no other answer. Either we choose Big Brother, how Big Brother manifests, or we choose what it says here in Psalm 91 and the rest of the scriptures. Quite frankly, if God is smart enough to make me and cause me to function biologically and mentally and spiritually, I think I'll trust Him.
Well, and I guess since we've only got about 2 minutes left, Al, that's a great segue to one more story this week. There were actually several stories, but they all kind of tie together into the framework of what's called artificial intelligence. And we've talked about this before. People like Stephen Hawking, physicist, and Elon Musk, neither one of them what you'd call great Bible scholars, I would think, have all said the scariest thing that they can possibly imagine is the arrival of an artificial intelligence, think Skynet from the Terminator series of movies, that wakes up and says, I've had it with you little ant-like men, we're taking control. And, sci-fi has talked about it for years, but essentially Musk this week was talking to the U.S. Governors Association and saying, you guys don't have a clue how scary this likelihood really is. And he has been talking about it for a while, but we now have seen people like Kalashnikov in Russia and other companies building Terminator robots, building drones with autonomous killing capability. And when this thing unfolds, and when men have done what they have done, and it's beyond incredibly stupid, it's literally kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, then reloading. Well, a whole lot of stuff can come down, the likes of which, if you think what we're talking about is scary, just imagine, go out and watch Terminator 1 and 2 again and see some of the things that these people were writing about. This is sci-fi, but guess what? It is not at all out there anymore. Take us out.
Yeah, it's not out there, so don't go changing your name to Sarah Connor. That would be bad. Well, Mark, that does wrap up another show for this week. So, folks, thanks for listening to Drive Time Friday on this 21st July. And on behalf of our colleague Jeff Gilbert and my good friend Mark Hall, this is Al McCarn saying, come on back next week. We'll talk more about the world going boom.
And look up for your redemption does draw nigh, and understand that we are supposed to be obedient to the real God, not the fakes. Hey, thanks, Al. Thanks, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.